Okay, hi everybody. Wonderful to meet all of you. As I mentioned, I recently moved to Pittsburgh from the wonderful city of Chicago, and it was at the University of Chicago where I was an admissions counselor, and reading both domestic and then eventually shifting over to international applications. My own academic journey is a long and varied one. I started out in religious studies out of an interest in Asian cultures, then discovered an interest in neuroscience that I pursued at UNC Chapel Hill through continuing studies before finding this interdisciplinary human development program for my PhD at the University of Chicago. And during that time is when I worked at the U Chicago admissions office. But also, I know this is both STEM and pre-med interests. I should also mention that one of my first jobs in the North Carolina area was actually reading MCAT essay tests. And also, in addition to my admissions work at the University of Chicago, I also both taught the writing portion of the University of Chicago's MCAT prep test and worked for their office in of health professions with every University of Chicago current student who was applying to med schools, where I reviewed and gave feedback on all of their med school personal statements. And generally, having worked in the field of gerontology after my human development program, and having this neuroscience and larger biomedicine background has made working with STEM students, and especially pre-med students and biological science students, one of my specialties here at Ingenious Prep and elsewhere, which has also included multiple BSMD applications, which frankly I think are the hardest applications in college admissions. Certainly the most daunting acceptance rates and number of hoops to jump through.
Awesome. Well, and also I am Dorothy 140. I am the Marketing and Special Projects Manager here at Ingenious. And before we dive into those Q&As that I mentioned and the rest of the information that we are going to get into, there are a few other people I would like for you to become familiar with, especially if this is the first time you are joining us. So, first up, that would be our team of over 150 former admissions officers from top schools all across the country. So, like Roscoe, they come from schools like MIT, Harvard, Duke, Yale, Johns Hopkins, just to name a few. And our former admissions officers work on a two-on-one team with our graduate coaches to create personalized admission strategies for your students. So these lovely people you see on the screen, they are graduates from these top universities. They know exactly what it takes to become students there because they have done it themselves. We also give our students access to over 200 professors, scholars, and researchers in programs like our academic mentorships, where students can conduct individualized mentorships in an area of their interest. So this coming fall, we have a variety of courses. And this past summer, we had courses in using AI in environmental issues and how to solve them using AI and machine learning. We've had courses, Is It Legal? Going over different legal scenarios and their legality. In the past, we've had the statistics of basketball, fundamentals of cancer biology, neuroscience, and music, just a variety of courses for a variety of different interests. And our curriculum. So we take objective insights from our former admissions officers. So we pick their brains and we get all their little insider school trade secrets, and we put all of that information together to create our systematic and operational curriculum. So we've built this kind of hive mind that even though your students are working with two counselors, a graduate coach and a former admissions officer, say that FAO is from Yale and the GC is from Duke, but your student is really interested in Stanford, with the hive mind that we have created, you will still have the same access to all of that specific Stanford information and all of the other schools that your student is applying to. So with this kind of counselor hive mind, you still get all of that same information, as well as all of the other insider secrets from all of those other schools as well. Which leads us to our results. This is some of our results from last year. And our students are 8 times more likely to be admitted to the Ivy League. And for every additional year of service with us, our students' chances of being admitted increase by 10%. All right, STEM admissions data. First, trivia question. So, what percentage of college applicants apply as a prospective STEM major? What do you think? All right. Okay, C, D. Anyone think A? B? All right, we got a C and two D's. Another C? Okay. Okay, well, drum roll, please. It is D. So over 1/3, which all of you are pretty close, over 1/3 of college applicants apply with an interest in STEM. So with thousands of students interested in the field of STEM and all of those different options, it is a very competitive pool, which most of you have already known, but now you know it doubly. And what is the acceptance rate at MIT? It shifts, but it's in it shifts every year, of course, but it's in a similar ballpark most of the time. Yes, and you guys are on it. So half of the students admitted to MIT who submitted test scores have an SAT score between a 1520 and a 1580, or an ACT score of a 35 or a 36. So pretty close to perfect. So the takeaway from all of this is that STEM fields are incredibly popular, and because of that popularity, they are super competitive. So in order to be admitted as a STEM student, you have to stand out. You have to do something that makes you different from all of the other students who have those really, really great scores, the SAT scores and other scores and whatnot. So after you submit your application, what happens? You just wait for a letter? Well, in the admissions office, your application is going through this process. So once it gets to the admissions office, they split it into digital piles, and then those applications are separated by region. Each admissions officer then gets that pile and then they review it. So they review all of the applications in their pile and select the handful that they would like to admit. Then all of the other admissions officers come back as a committee to debate who should be accepted or rejected. So the takeaway from this, back in the day when applications were printed out, they would be around 13 pages long, and it would be in a stack of applications that can be as tall as a 20-story building. To put in perspective, some schools, the UC schools, are top of mind right now for me, but they received over 250 applications. So that's 250 applications that are 13 pages long. So there is a lot of applications and a lot of students. And you are compared to the other applicants from your region. So that region, that is your competition. And at the end of the day, if you don't stand out, you won't be remembered. So the admissions officer won't advocate for you and you won't be admitted. So your application really has to make that admissions officer want to scream and run and jump from the rooftops that you absolutely have to go to their school. And with that, I will let Roscoe take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So anyway, I'm here to really talk about the core service that Ingenious is offering, and that is really helping with this strategy and approach to a student's college education at whatever point a student might begin working with us. When we are thinking about the things that are needed to get into college. I think that yeah, everybody's probably familiar with the items on this list. But the way I always put it to my students is that these are the things that get you serious consideration at the most competitive schools, but they are not what gets you in. And I can tell you, I turned away many applicants with a 1600 SAT at the University of Chicago because frankly there wasn't a whole lot else there. And especially if your family is coming from, an educational system outside of the United States, this may look very different than the educational systems like you see over a lot of East Asia and South Asia, which where it's you score above this level, you're in, you score below it, and you're out. But in the United States, part of the holistic process and the level of competitiveness in the most elite schools means that this is only a starting point. Okay, next. All right. And as you consider what for those of you that are closer to the application process than others, there are a number of things to consider when building your school list. Acceptance rate is certainly one of them. The median test scores, actually for SAT and ACT, we recommend looking at what's commonly referred to and common and pretty easy to find. In terms of the middle 50, the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile of test score ranges in your major standardized tests. And also, looking at percentage of STEM students in general. There are some schools that are just, known as science schools, and other schools are known as, engineering schools and may have a stronger degree of emphasis on science and math than others. Whereas and Purdue would be a classic engineering example of this, but you also have schools like the University of Michigan where they're really strong across the board from humanities and STEM and engineering all under one umbrella. So anyway, and then as you build your school list, absolutely you want to keep in mind reach, target, and safety options because at a lot of these reach schools, for lots of people that are watching this, the fact of the matter is they get more great applications than they can possibly accept. So there is a point at which is luck involved, and we're working with you to maximize a student's odds of acceptance. And so we want people to be very, very mindful, very, very, very mindful of that, regardless of how strong and what a rock star a student may be in their given high school. But also, there are many fantastic schools at many different levels of competitiveness across the United States, and that's one of the great things about our educational system. Okay, so some of the best known colleges for STEM students, I think, there are lots of lists and things like that out there. I'm not a particular fan of the rankings myself due to their flawed methodology, but there are certainly ways in which certain schools have placed a strong emphasis on the math and science and engineering training of their students. MIT, Caltech, Georgia Tech, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon here in Pittsburgh, John Hopkins would all fall under that category as having those really strong STEM reputations overall. On this list, Stanford, Berkeley, and Yale would probably fall, while they're very strong at science, they would also fall into that kind of very well-rounded school that also is has some very very real strengths in sciences as well. Liberal arts colleges, Harvey Mudd is fantastic in liberal arts for its very strong focus on the sciences. But it is certainly not the case that liberal arts schools are not able to prepare you for a very strong career and future in science. And this list covers a lot of the strongest liberal arts schools in that respect. There's my alma mater, Carleton, which I always say is one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. And there are a number of options and a number of strengths of liberal arts schools for STEM students as well, due to the greater access to teachers and small class sizes and greater emphasis on undergraduate education, since these schools are not as driven by getting on the STEM side and are not as driven by getting research grants. Oh, sorry, looks like I went back. And then when it comes to engineering programs, that this list looks very similar. We're also adding University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, which has become very strong in the engineering area. I mentioned Ann Arbor in Michigan earlier. Cornell is probably my favorite Ivy League school for engineering, especially if a student has some environmental interest as well, which has been a long-term commitment that Cornell has had. As far as pre-med support, you've got lots of nice options here, but also recognize that um, that pre-med is generally not a major, and it's more a list of courses that every med school wants to see, and they will be looking at your not only your GPA in general, but also your GPA in those specific pre-med courses themselves. So in a lot of ways, if a student is worried about their ability to succeed at these more prestigious and challenging universities, keeping in mind that especially for pre-med, the great importance of getting that 3.7 or 3.8 GPA for med schools is also very much a consideration to keep in mind. Actually, a reason that I do not generally recommend the University of Chicago for pre-med, due to the negative impact that its very rigorous core curriculum can have on a GPA, which can create a hole that many pre-med students find themselves having to later dig out of. Okay, true or false? Some colleges that do not have separate undergraduate STEM programs still require additional essays for students who indicate an interest in STEM. What do we think here in the chat? Okay, we got one vote for true. All right, true. Another vote for true. Okay, lots of votes. Lots of votes. We got three votes for true. I'll let. Okay, true is really coming on strong. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip to our answer here and up. Oh, sorry. So yes, this is true, and yes, schools are schools are very much interested in knowing that you're interested in STEM and knowing why you're interested in their particular STEM program. There's the old and we can get into that later, but I'll give you a preview. There's that old real estate. There's this old real estate joke that some of you guys may have heard of. What are the three most important things in real estate? Location, location, and location. And the college version of that, what are the three most important things in college admissions? Fit, fit, and fit. So not only do we want, so colleges are going to want to know that you're interested in STEM, and they're going to want to know why you're interested in their specific STEM opportunities that they have. All right. So, and we also see in some cases, especially where it's a larger university and they may have a school of engineering, a school of computer science, and things like that. There may be separate questions specifically for that STEM focused school. And here we have two examples, one from Yale and one from and one from Princeton. But again, no, back to my other point, notice what is in bold in that Yale prompt. What it is about Yale's engineering program that appeals to you. And you know what? Even when they don't say, what is it about our engineering program, I highly recommend my students to always still indicate what is it about the engineering program and engineering at this specific school so that the admissions officers know that there is a strong fit. Not and this is not only because they're getting more great applications than they can possibly accept, but also from an admissions officer's perspective, we're interested in yield. And yield is that percentage of students that are offered admission who decide to come. So the better you describe your fit, the higher likelihood from an admissions officer's point of view that this will yield an acceptance of an admission decision, and all of that goes in your favor. Okay. So anyway, lots of schools to choose from for a STEM candidate, and you can go in a million different directions. I think that as someone partisan towards liberal arts colleges in general, I think they're often a little too quickly dismissed by STEM students who want the fanciest, most cutting edge, gear on the planet for these schools that are bringing in tons of research dollars, but that may not always be the best choice for all students and their needs. Those research dollars and the amount of time spent writing grants for that, the support of the grad students who support these grants and things like that. At some larger schools can mean that undergraduates might not be getting the level of attention that they would ideally like or might personally need. All right. So let's talk about building a profile. We know their grades and test scores and standardized and APs and things like that. But let's talk about how we work with students to build up their strengths in the STEM area. Number one, doing some research. And when I meet with students and who are considering working with me, one of the things that I say most often is I want to work with you to identify and channel your passions. And students are at various different points along the path in terms of having more specific interests, or their interests may be much more extracurricularly focused and not as academically focused. But on the academic side, as I work with students, I'm really pushing them to find those areas that they are most passionate about and develop expertise in those areas. And it really makes a lot of difference, for a student to have not just sort of a broad general interest in a topic like biology or chemistry or whatever it may be, but to really have developed some significant, more specific interests. That I want to I want to I'm really interested in neural implants to help with Alzheimer's disease. I've worked with students who have done fantastic work and projects on the gut microbiome. I've worked with students who have been really into weightlifting and created a weightlifting app that can use your phone's camera to analyze your weightlifting form. But once we find those specific passions, we really want students to find as much opportunity as possible to conduct research into those areas. and you're building analytic skills, reading and writing skills. Now and a lot of what's being described here is probably most relevant for something more along the the research paper side of things. But yeah, I would say also, biologists also talk a lot about, their toolbox of skills and techniques that they've acquired along the way, and so where relevant, some bench work and hands-on lab experience is great. Engineering as a field in general screams hands-on to me, and so I always really push I always really push students to find some ways to get some hands-on experience there, because I want to make sure that this is something that you have skills and experience in and know is something that you like and would want to continue with. Um, okay. And again, that research can be on any topic of interest. But but we want you to find some specificity, and find and a student to find something that they're really excited to be learning about. Wake up on a Saturday morning excited to dig back into the great, the latest exciting paper on the influence of the gut biome on major depression. That's actually a study that came out within the last week, interestingly enough. And so yeah, so this is something that we really want to encourage greatly, and it's going to be very important, and it's going to be a differentiator, and that's important, as we'll see later, right? It's students become memorable in part through these specific interests that they've developed, and we can learn about students by the projects that they're excited about and motivated to work on and doing research into. Um, and then students interested in STEM and medicine, can enroll in summer STEM classes for your more advanced students and older students, in addition to high school programs designed for high school students. I'm also a huge fan of students taking advantage of opportunities in the summer to take courses for college credit. Lots of universities offer that. Cornell, Harvard, Berkeley, UCLA, UC Santa Cruz will accept students as young as 14 if they're academically strong enough. Seeking out a research team, and this can be tricky, conducting research with a local university lab or professor. Not an easy process, I will tell you. Students unfortunately will get ghosted a lot and have some doubts about, what a high school student can contribute. It's not the easiest process, but we do have expertise and experience that can help guide a student into how to do that in a way to achieve the best possibility of good results. Volunteering in hospitals or other healthcare related settings also definitely works, as long as you're not hit with some age restrictions that can differ from state to state and country. Starting your own research group, writing that scientific research paper. For those of you in computer science, really racking up the coding skills and pushing towards something, something like a program or an app that can demonstrate that your ability to translate your skills into a tangible product. So here are some here's some different project ideas that that have been suggested here. I think in medicine, again, due to restrictions of student access and ability to work with actual patients, sometimes public health education becomes a much more viable component of that work. An app for computer science, engineering. You could go in a number of different directions. I mean, helping a neighborhood with infrastructural needs sounds like more of a civil engineering project. Mechanical engineering project might look different. Electrical engineering, hey, let's come up with an idea, create a circuit board, for it. chemistry, lots of different possibilities, especially with environmental sciences, and physics and engineering. This one seemed a little bit overambitious, building a robot that helps your community. But what we're really getting at is that that hands-on and building of something. So anyway, if you are aiming, especially aiming for a top STEM program, you really want to be digging in and creating this expertise and creating this skill set. And think of that as a skill set in terms of knowledge and expertise. But also, we're relevant back to that idea of building, building a toolbox where you may be able to find some opportunities for hands-on work. All right, let's get into some do's and don'ts of approaching application components as a STEM student. Always fun. So, as an admissions officer, I certainly want to see your level of commitment to STEM fields. And that's going to include STEM related extracurriculars outside of the classroom. But I think, and by the way, PLME is Brown's BSMD program, which may be the hardest program to get into in the United States. But there are a ton of different STEM related clubs. There's HOSA, the Health Occupation Student Association. Tons of robotics, clubs and things like that. And these are important to demonstrate your interest. But tons of other STEM students are also doing this, and so you're not really, you're not necessarily differentiating yourself by doing these things, and finding something that's a little bit more unique, a little bit more differentiating is really especially key. And and again, thinking outside the box, doing things that are not kind of the standard expected activities for STEM students is going to be very, very important here, because you really need to think about what is going to make you stand out and what is going to make you memorable among admissions officers. And this applies whether or not you are whether or not you're applying in STEM. I break debaters' hearts every year when I caution them about how incredibly difficult it is to stand apart and differentiate yourself in an essay about debating. Essays on tutoring really have to pop, really have to, have something special about them to make them stand out, because it's such a common topic for students to write about. So you really want to be thinking about that uniqueness and the memorability in the profile that you're creating. So the do's. It's great to show if there's an overlap or intersection between STEM and other areas. Again, back to this sort of memorability, possibility. And there are lots of different directions that could go. I'm working with a student currently who plays guitar and is a big rock fan, in addition to wanting to get into more soldering and hands-on work. So we discussed, hey, maybe you could build a guitar, an effects pedal for an electric guitar, to kind of, as one way to kind of show and develop those technical, electric circuitry skills, and still tying it to another area outside of STEM. And again, this says interest in humanities and STEM. I would also add to this humanities and STEM, arts and STEM, social sciences and STEM, kind of, STEM plus a little something else, whether it's in the classroom or an academic or more extracurricular. For my mathematically oriented athletes, I very much encourage them to look into things like sports analytics as a way of connecting those mathematical skills with another passion or interest. Take advantage of those supplemental essays. fit again. Why this particular school? And from early early versions of supplemental essays, for gosh, 95% of my students, my comment is you need to do more research. Go back to the drawing board. Get me more specifics. It's not enough to just cut and paste in the name of a class that you're interested in. What's that lab? What's that center? What's that initiative? Who's that professor doing the most exciting research that that you've ever seen in your life? Um, and again, back to prioritizing unique extracurriculars and honors. Um, chemistry and cooking as a YouTube channel is something is a nice one. Again, I mentioned the weightlifting app. We've got the example of an app for clean drinking water. Community gardens and using those as a way to study ecology. I come from Western North Carolina, so I'm especially interested in those mathematical patterns of square dancing. Or things like designing an object, a potentially useful object. For example, this idea of a desk for quadriplegics. Um, Science fairs are great to participate in. High level competitions, if you feel like you're going to have a good chance of success there, and you feel like you are going to be strong in those competitions. Leadership in school clubs is always looked for. You've got competitive, competitive summer programs, or I would add to the summer programs that are as tightly connected as possible to those specific areas of expertise that a student has had. For example, I have a student who went to a great general science program at Shad in Canada over the summer. He knows he's really, really passionate about chemistry, and so my advice is, hey, I don't think you should focus on another kind of general all-purpose expose you to lots of different areas in the sciences program. Let's get chemistry specific and show you developing that specific knowledge, and then also hands-on internships. Now, one word of caution here, and this especially for those of you coming from an East Asian background. I find that in general, there is much more focus on competitions in a lot of families than is actually warranted based on how applications are read by admissions readers. And I very much, suggest, okay, choose your competitions wisely and deliberately, and don't let prep for competitions and competition work take up so much time that you're shortchanging the time that you might have available for a more unique and distinctive project that helps you be more memorable and stand apart. Because by just participating in these conversations, you're just competing against a sea of other students who are participating in these conversations in these competitions. I think again, this idea of combining arts and humanities and social sciences. There's computer science and classics. For our digital historians out there, there might be some overlap in computer science and art and graphic design. We see our socially conscious engineer looking at things related to engineering and sociology. But I think get it, now again, don't force it. If the interest isn't there, this is about your students' passions and channeling them. But where these opportunities exist, it's certainly worth looking into. True or false? Admissions officers are impressed when students participate in competitions. Oh gosh, I forgot this. I forgot this question was in here. May have given away the ship. All right. Well, folks may have fallen asleep by now or already know the answer. False. Yeah, it's impressive if a student has placed highly at significant competitions. Um, But in general, like I'd said, this needs to be weighed against the odds, the strength of the student and odds of success, and the time expenditure required versus using that time for other things that are going to help you stand out more and be a more memorable applicant. Okay, the don'ts. All right, what do we have for the don'ts? Avoiding too much repetition, and especially this especially comes into account this time of year when all of our students are writing personal statements. And very often, an early draft of a personal statement can read just like a repeat of the activities list. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't write about things that are in your activities list. Obviously, those are very important things to you. But you really need to expand upon it and really get into the hows and the whys and how does this connect to you as a as a person, and how are we using this activity to tell your story. But some students just have such an instinct to, like, oh my gosh, I want to brag again about these things that are in my activities list, forgetting that, hey, an admissions officer is going to see that stuff on your activities list. The personal statement is a chance to tell your story, expand on things in the activities list, maybe answer some questions in an activities, in an activities list, and then connect that to them personally. Yeah, one of the examples that comes to mind, it's not STEM, but was working with a student of Chinese origin whose family lived in Thailand, who was just nuts about classics and Latin, and I think that we think about the questions that an admissions officer might ask when reading that activities list. Yeah, as I said to him, one of those questions was, "Hey, how this Chinese guy living in Thailand get so interested in classics?" And that became a lot of the story, in his personal statement, and we just had to steer clear of it being too much of a brag and too much of a repeat of the activities list. Not highlighting activities that are very that are very common, for all our engineers in the house. Robotics would be the big one there. Outside of STEM, you've got debate and model UN, tutoring, as mentioned before, and we want to find ways to really highlight things that are distinctive, or highlight something that feels very distinctive and unique about these sort of more common programs. And working with a former admissions officer can kind of help you feel that out. At this time of year, I feel like my radar for overly generic essays is comes in very handy for the students that I work with. Also, don't only apply to reach schools. As I mentioned before, there are more great applicants than there possibly are slots. And especially, if we're talking about the STEM fields, that there remains an ongoing demand for STEM and technical degrees and engineers coming out of whatever school is producing engineers. And so make sure you're keeping in mind target and safety options as well. And often some of those options will, there will be very unique things that these schools are doing to try and recruit the best students that could be of a great advantage. One in particular that I look for when we're thinking about target and safety schools is very serious, intensive internship or co-op programs. A co-op program is usually where you get credit for an internship that you're on for an entire semester. So while Northeastern is the most famous school for these kinds of things, and is very competitive, Drexel is fantastic for that. Another thing that I like in target and safety schools is those programs where you have what are generally referred to as a 4+1 program, where with an extra year, you can also gain a master's degree, whether you want to combine STEM with science, with business, and get an MBA, or go ahead and get an advanced degree with only one more year of work at that school. And those are some things, in addition to other unique opportunities at target and safety schools, that do certainly make these more appealing. Hey, what's a typical STEM student look like? Okay, pretty darn great scores, math Olympiad, robotics. Especially if you're in the engineering areas, we see a lot. We see a lot of we see a lot of students who are heavily involved in music as well, and have been put into music and classical music since a young age from by their families. So that just that stuff alone makes it pretty tough to stand out. And again, so here we've got robotics, coding clubs, our Olympiads, the math competitions. So again, they may be very meaningful for the students. They may be a way for a student to demonstrate the skills that they've acquired. And this is not to discourage participation in these, especially if these are things that students get a lot of value from, and hopefully enjoyment as well as value. But we need to be aware that they're very common in the admissions process. So I'm going to quickly go through a previous student of ours, Maggie, whose name has been changed here in terms of the different ways that we work together to help Maggie in her application. So look pretty good from all of those kind of standard academic backgrounds, lots of APs, lots of good GPA, good SAT super score, and things like that. So she was a little unclear on her major. Had lots of different extracurricular activities, but in a way that kind of didn't show any kind of clear through lines and focus, which gets to be a little bit of an issue. Didn't have the leadership that we would have liked to have seen, and was having trouble standing out from her peers. So in 11th grade, we put together her extracurricular enhancement plan in order for her to stand out more. We dug into exploration for her to find those specifics, areas that she was passionate about and that she could explore more deeply. We started doing some school research and worked on course selection, summer planning, and her persona strategy, which would be kind of the shorthand, elevator speech version of who this student is. So we looked at the strengths and weaknesses, and worked with her to narrow down a major, help on the leadership activities, as well as things like bumping up some test scores that weren't where we wanted them. And lots of ways to narrow down a major. And this can take a very varying amounts of time from student to student. Some students come right in and say, "Look, I love neuroscience. This is it for me." And other students like, "Oh yeah, I like biology and I like chemistry." So, this can be a easier, more difficult process from student to student, but certainly very important. So anyway, Maggie narrowed down those those areas of interest. Sorry, moving through here, we came we came up with some strategic major recommendations, recommending physics and mathematics, as well as other engineering options that might be a little bit more specific if she decided to go in an engineering direction. We worked with her again on extracurricular enhancement. I'm sorry, I just need to move quickly in the interest of time. We wanted to make sure that she had more STEM and volunteering activities in her profile. I will mention as an aside, if anybody's interested in BSMD kinds of programs, brutal as they are, something that is extraordinarily important here is making sure a student knows what they're getting into in a clinical setting. So that's both lab work, volunteering, and hopefully shadowing of doctors. Just in case anybody has that, I see some. Looks like there's some good pre-med discussion in the chat that I'm not able to follow as I talk here, but worth noting. We work on letter of recommendation guidance. We did worked on a lot of research on school lists to find that best fit for Maggie. And and that included a lot of recommendations at safety target reach settings under a variety of different criteria for her to narrow down. We worked on that. What was that memorable persona that we can create? And landed on a top woman in physics who couples her creativity with a strong STEM ability to come up with unique ways to have a positive impact on the world around her. Um, and then once we have this persona, we find ways to highlight it throughout the application. We'll also work with our students on brainstorming personal statements and then executing that brainstorming, editing, locking down that final version that really, gets across Maggie's interests, uniqueness, personalities, and outlook. Um, and Then we similarly, worked with supplemental essays again, back to the question of fit, making sure there's strong connection between Maggie and the school, making sure that she's answering the prompt that's being asked. This is a surprising problem in a lot of applications. Students feel like they can just cut and paste something kind of maybe similar, but aren't reading the prompt strongly enough, and not recognizing the admissions officer is kind of looking out for cut and paste essays that may not reflect a strong interest in the school. Finalize those versions, working and editing the activities list, finalizing that activities list, and she was accepted to her top choice of Columbia University, early decision. So anyway, that's Maggie's story. Very quickly, here's just kind of a quick slide, with some of our results from 24 and 25 among many of these very STEM focused schools.
hmm This is just
And
a brief overview of the results from this past year.
yes,
Um, And here's our programs and services. So we offer candidacy building for 7th through 11th grades. So starting early to help build your child's profile 2-on-1 with the help of a former admissions officer and a graduate coach. So they can help every step along the way, helping you and your family pick the right courses, um, help narrow down an interest if your child doesn't know what they are interested in, um, figure out which teachers might be letters of recommendation writers, just be a guiding hand all along the way. Those academic mentorships I mentioned. Our Leadership and Innovation Lab, so students will launch a business organization or a platform with the help of an entrepreneurship expert. Um, Young leaders for our middle school age kids, helping them become the best high schooler they can be and planting that firm foundation so they can hit the ground running and have an even stronger profile. Competition prep, this is a new one, so we will help your students increase your students' skill set and their chances of winning that competition to enhance their overall application and admission chances. Subject tutoring and test prep, of course, and then application counseling. For our seniors, we are in our final review season for the early round, so that is uh, the realm we are in. But if you have any questions about any of our programs, you can hit yes on the poll that I just launched. Your consultation will be about a 30-minute call where we will learn all about you, your student, where they want to go to school, what they want to study, of course, answer any questions you might have, but then come together and create the best plan on how we can get your child into that dream school. One thing of note, we are offering um, our Lil director, Maya, she has put together a in-person internship in a hospital in Shanghai if you are able to travel in December, where students will be able to shadow real life doctors, be able to handle real life equipment, um, be able to do everything that those doctors would be doing and like shadow, test out skills, all of that stuff. I'm not STEM inclined, so I don't really know all that much, but um, just a really good opportunity. If you are able to travel, you can talk to your enrollment counselor on your call about this trip. It seems really interesting. It'll be 5 days of your student shadowing those real professionals. Yeah, I they will have much more information than me. But with that, now is the time to dive into some questions.
And Dorothy, while you're looking at the questions, have been going back through the chat, and it looks like there's been a side conversation between one of our attendees, Peter, and other people in relation to pre-med. I think generally, Peter, your advice is looking pretty solid. But to the question of that list of pre-med schools, yes, we chose pre-med school. Those are top, gosh, probably all top 20 schools that were listed in that. But I'll also say that those are not necessarily always the best options for students that want to pursue pre-med. Again, back to the University of Chicago and the terrible thing, and for all of its wonderful characteristics, the terrible things it can do to a student's GPA. I've had many conversations with my colleagues at University of Chicago that, hey, if we were going to advise a student to before they decide on the college to go, who knows they want to be a doctor, that we'd recommend University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign over the University of Chicago. And Pitt here in Pittsburgh, not surprisingly, fantastic pre-med support and program at not that uber competitive kind of level. I very much love Case Western for much for much the same reason. Case Western does a fantastic job of getting students into research opportunities early. And I would say if you're looking for pre-med or a lot of STEM things, one of the questions you want to ask of any school is how easy is it for an undergraduate to get research experience? And sometimes it's a matter of you're even looking at the geography of a school. Can I cross the street and go do my volunteering and clinical work in a hospital? Or do I need to hop on a bus for 20 minutes and it's taken up my entire afternoon? But yes, access to research opportunities is going to be a really huge one in almost any STEM field. Okay, how are we looking on questions? Dorothy, hit me.
Yes. Okay. Just to answer Julie's question, so we will send out a copy of this recording to everyone so you can check your email for that tomorrow. But for our question, first up, so are summer programs competitive and do they increase your chance of admissions?
Um, Doing something in the summer certainly increases your chance of admissions. The summer programs themselves can vary in competitiveness from uber competitive, like Ross for mathematics, for example, to some great programs that really are a lot more rolling admissions for first come in and first serve. Though though for summer programs, again, you need to weigh the competitiveness, chances of admission, but also how well they align with your students' needs. To choose a summer program just because it's elite and competitive, and if it's not in line with what that student wants to do, or the student's interests are much more specialized and already well beyond what that program covers, then it probably doesn't make that much sense. I've addressed the issue of competition. Certainly, if you do very well in those in those STEM areas, we do. There are 5 slots for honors. In the Common App, but again, it's a matter of making sure the time spent preparing for those does not take away from those activities that can better differentiate you and make you a more memorable candidate.
Um,
Humanist thinking, cultural involvement through essays, certainly a nice component to highlight and show in a STEM candidate if that is there. Especially for our, if pre-med students or somebody that might want to take that leap into BSMD. There's certainly within medicine a huge emphasis on cultural competence among doctors, and so that is very much going to be appreciated. Why do some STEM applicants get accepted into multiple top 10 schools and others don't? Tough to say. These are all unique cases, but you know what? I would bet dollars to donuts that they're getting into those multiple top 10 schools because their essays really sing and really allow them to tell that story and stand out as somebody unique that these schools would want to have. B or C in ninth grade. It's not it's not great. Below the level of B, yes, you can yes, you can explain it. But there's also an understanding that students mature at different rates. And there's always the question when looking at an application, is a poor grade an anomaly or not, and or kind of are, especially when looking from ninth grade to later grades, um, are we seeing some signs that, hey, something clicked for that student after ninth grade and they really turned a corner? Um, Information advice on transfer students. Not an area of a lot of expertise. For me, we want, we want to see very strong grades at the point of being a transfer student in STEM. If you're in a lab area, certainly, showing the ability to secure some of those opportunities, in the school that you're currently at would be one of them. Um, some STEM safe schools. I mean, on the engineering side of things, and again, this is back to this, the fewer number of liberal arts colleges that are out there. Rose Holman, I very much like. I also think that there are a lot of liberal arts colleges for CS in particular that can be great. I've got a friend whose sons are both at Oberlin in Ohio, which may be a target for some students, a safety for others. But because of that liberal arts atmosphere and close contact with professors, they both of the sons have been able to get some great coding experience and CS experience there. I would look at liberal arts colleges. Worcester Polytechnic, Rochester Institute of Technology, or some other ones. Worcester has a very project-based system that's great and very hands-on. Um, Having zero program extracurriculars in the summer is going to disadvantage an international student. It depends. It depends on what the student has been doing over the summer. We want to see evidence of a student having done something over the summer. If it's if it's not a summer program, we want to be seeing that they're doing something productive and useful. I had a student this year who decided not to do a summer program and instead actually stayed at his high school to work on a modular robot design and go for a rocketry world record and design a hybrid rocket motor over the summer with some high school buddies. And so I think that's gonna be great in his application, but we need to see something and that they're productive. Science fair, competition, solo or group. I would say I don't know that I have much strong feeling one way or another. I think it really would much more important to come down to the strength of the topic. Middle school honors, no. The Common App is very, very clear that we want we're only looking at ninth grade and above in your honors and activities list. Let's see. I see one last question here in the chat. Model U and debate helpful for engineering students. Yeah, it's nice. It shows breadth. It shows speaking ability and some social skills and skills outside of engineering. Might speak to some potential future project management leadership kind of strengths. But hugely helpful. I'm not sure. Also, again, you run into Model UN and debate being very 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 common extracurricular activities, although less so among a pool of engineering students. And let's see, we had one last uh international candidates, that's entirely by visa visa and immigration status, and that's very much and that's very much tied to considerations on finances, scholarship money, availability of college aid through the government and elsewhere. And I'm seeing how effective are the Olympiads. Again, they're fine. If you can really succeed in them, that's a wonderful thing to put on your honors list. But are you doing it at the expense of things that could differentiate you and make you more memorable? Then I would choose something that would make you more memorable, or choose your competitions wisely so they're not eating up too much of a student's time that could be better spent differentiating themselves. All right. Um, Other than competitions, how can you show a passion for math? Math's tricky in that way. And I think that for the most part, it'll be finding an area of applied math that a student is very excited about. That could be sports analytics, that could be maybe kind of moving into some sort of more data science kinds of directions. But math is tricky in that extent, and really can often have to get creative. But also the other great way to show passion for math is taking advanced math classes outside of your high school, um, to to really show that you've got your that you're advanced as possible. And that can that can be that can be a major interest. And again, I see Dorothy in the chat has said finding a way to connect math with other interests, which is what I was getting at when saying find that applied math option.
Okay.
All right.
Awesome.
Memorable activities in the past besides research or lab work. I could go on forever. I've had a international level competitive sailor. I've had as a student with a passion for mopeds. I mean, it really is, really could go in a million directions. And so again, it's work with the students, identify their passions if they aren't already clear, and then channel those passions in multiple directions. All
Awesome.
right. Thank you guys. Sorry we've run over a little bit. I'm glad so many of you have stuck around. And if any follow up or other interest in anything that we can help with, please let us know. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for a very engaging conversation tonight.
Yes. Thank you all. And hopefully we will see you at another webinar next week. We are answering your last minute questions before the early application deadline. So hopefully we will see that at that one. All right.
All right.
Have a
Great, everybody.
great evening, everyone.